Hello, folks. Today we address the third segment of our discussions on asset accumulation in economic growth, focusing today on technology and productivity. That is to say, those components associated with the TFP, with the total factor productivity, that we have uh, highlighted as the main basis of progression of an income, the income of a country up the ladder. And let me break down the determinants of the evolution of that productivity into two buckets. One of them related to technology issues, the other one more broadly to the efficiency in the allocation of factors of production, the allocation of resource. So on technology, look, keep in mind that although we tend to identify technology innovation with inventions of new gadgets or new equipments and so on, technology is knowledge applied to production, knowledge applied to the review and innovations in production. Uh, there is technology in the most rudimentary activities, collecting garbage. Uh, the idea of technology is the use of existing knowledge or transferable knowledge that is used by whoever is doing something, doing some production, and of course, technology, as we have already mentioned, is not a free good because sometimes, very often, the transfer of technology, transfer of knowledge is, let's say, barred from, it's excluded. But the fact of the matter is that the technology is non-rival. Remember, non-rival. That means that its use by someone does not preclude, does not impede, does not diminish the possibility of that same tacit knowledge, that same knowledge being used by somebody else. So it's non-rival in its use. And components of technology and knowledge are non-excludable. They spill over easily, and that happens domestically or from between countries. And part of it is excludable in the sense that you need to buy a license or to buy the right to use a copyright or a patent and so on. But all in all, technology is something non-rival in its use and only excludable to some extent. And then you have the spillovers, the cross learning, people who learn by simply uh, sucking, for instance, personnel from another firm, or hiring someone that has worked somewhere else and brings with him or her the practice, the knowledge acquired, and so on. And these spillovers through reading, through accompanying research, and so on. See, this field of technology is a universe in itself. We're not expected, you're not supposed to have a domain of the whole thing here. But it suffices for the time being to keep in mind this, that it is partly uh, the result of this learning process using existing knowledge and transferable knowledge. But, and that comes the second leg that I highlight here, there's no such a thing as an existing knowledge or existing technology that is immediately applicable. There is always a local technological learning process specific to where the technology is being used, which is tacit. There is a tacit component Not everything can be laid out in the recipes embedded in handbooks and so on. And it's idiosyncratic because it will always be adapted to the circumstance. Of course, this component of tacitness and idiosyncratic features will vary by the sectors, but it's sufficiently broad for us to highlight that the use of any technology and the development of any technology, that the technological learning is a two-edged uh, uh, process. It delves on existing knowledge and technology, but also depends on the local tacit development. And that's why, just to finalize this introduction, technological learning is an investment because the degrees, the levels, and there are several forms of learning, learning by doing, learning by copying, learning by producing, learning by adapting, and so on. So all these forms of learning, of technological learning, they are investments because they suppose the dedication of resource, the dedication of time, the dedication of uh, some of the time, the labor available and resource that would be used in something else for consumption or whatever, but which are set apart to invest to make possible the technological learning. So keep this in mind. That's why we talk about technological assets. That's why we talk about intangible assets. Okay, that's the reason for it. Now, let's start by exactly saying something about innovation. The concept of innovation is quite important because, as I said, uh, the layman or people tend to associate innovation with invention, as if innovate is to create a new iPad. No, innovation uh, is defined as new ways to solve problems by combining technology, be it an improvement in product, in process, in marketing, or organization, with transformational entrepreneurship, typically involving commercialization of technologies via formal firms, but also including value generation by informal, not for profit, and government entities. So, uh, innovation means, as I said, different things to different people. Uh, we could say that innovation can be defined as the ability to use knowledge to develop and apply new ideas that result in change in the production and organizational structure of the firm. The great economist Joseph Schumpeter, or Schumpeter, uh, defined in 1934 several ways or several of the applications that qualify as innovation, as they are described in the middle of the chart. Introduction of a new product, of modifications to an existing product, a new process of technology in an industry, the discovery of a new market, the development of new source of supply of inputs and raw materials, change in the industrial organization, and there we go. So it is innovation is broader than invention. It also includes the commercial applications of new technologies, new materials, or new methods and processes. Okay. Therefore, the innovation also includes the invention of new technology and disruptive business models. Although important, these are a small part of the innovation process, but especially in those countries further away from the technological frontier. Uh, so, an implication of this broader view of innovation is the fact that firms accumulate knowledge to apply these new ideas in different ways. So they go much beyond R&D activities, the formal research and development activities, but also other knowledge accumulation activities, often informal or through collaboration with other firms, through learning from clients, or by participating, for instance, in global value chains or international markets. It's a major driver of economic growth and productivity, by definition. Uh, and they range from incremental, new to the firm adoption and adaptation of existing technologies to radical, new to the world creation and commercialization of disruptive products and processes. Uh, well, in the technological learning and innovation, they can lead to lower costs for existing and new or higher quality products, enhancing productivity and thereby competitiveness and inclusive growth. Remember, and I will still mention this again, a key fact of development is that differences in measured inputs explain less than half of the enormous differences in per capita national income. Okay. Uh, Before we move to the next slide, let me give a snapshot on what are the most important determinants of innovation. They can be broken down into four main areas. Of course, as I have insisted before, incentives for productive entrepreneurship, rule of law, which guarantees the property of what you do in terms of innovation, sufficiently generous rewards that enable entrepreneurs to grow without fear of expropriation. There must also be sufficient competition pressure to prevent deviation from efficient innovation actions. Second, determine skills, including the research and development support for the building of absorptive capacity within enterprise. Third, the responsiveness of management and worker training to change in market demands, technical assistance to facilitate long-term collaboration for education and research between business associations and universities, scholarships to study abroad. All this enters into this second bucket. Third bucket, information, including openness to trade, foreign direct investment, technology licensing, and global talent flows. And fourth, finance, including the availability of a mix of public and private financial instruments and institutional delivery mechanisms. See, a point is that the natural thing for the countries coming from behind, the countries that are still on their way, and instead of reinventing wheels, the natural way for them to accumulate those assets is by prioritizing diffusion, technological learning, and adaptation of more efficient existing technologies for productivity upgrading and for the sustainable generation of more and better jobs. This is the most important aspect to keep in mind. Now, obviously, those processes of learning, they hinge on the as I said, local development of capacity, and that's why I'm trying to just a moment. We should look at the capabilities for innovation that are exactly innovation in the broad sense that are to be developed. And see, the key capabilities for innovation in the broad sense can be broken down into the technological capabilities or capabilities, that is to say, the several knowledge-based activities and assets that firms develop or purchase to strengthen their technological potential. Some of these activities are more prevalent, of course, in technologically mature economies, and particularly firms closer to the technological frontier that have the capability to create more radical innovations. However, firms in less developed countries can start accumulating some of these capabilities in line with the process of increasing the accumulation of R&D as they converge towards the technological frontier. Second type of capability is the production capabilities, which is the broad set of capabilities needed to improve production processes through both internal factors and relations with external agents. And the organizational or managerial capabilities. This is quite important. See, we hadn't measured until recently the differences and the levels of organizational managerial capabilities. But once we start to do it, there are several works cited in the documents that I gave you, referring to how the organization and managerial capabilities matter a lot when it comes to the evolution of productivity. Now, that's why I want, you guys saw this in one of the texts, the capabilities escalator. What is the idea here? Now, look, typically, think of a new, completely new product, a radical innovation, right? When it starts, it uses the invention capabilities. But before it becomes part of the economic process and it becomes to be produced and sold and traded, there is the exercise of technological adoption capabilities. And as well, eventually, the use of production capabilities in order to translate those technologies adopted and adapted into production. I don't recall if I told you the story, but anyway, it's very much applicable to what I have in mind here, of an interesting case of a producer of solar cells in Korea, in South Korea, that I visited back in 2008. And the story was the following. The guy was an engineer, a South Korean engineer who had lived and worked for some time in the US. And one day he had the idea of buying the right to use a patent on a solar cell developed at the University of Delaware. But it was there, it was simply a patent, and any product at the level of a university is an experiment at a very small scale, controlled scale for thesis making and so on. But his idea and what he was doing at the time was the following. He got together with 5 other Korean engineers and proposed, and they were at the time developing, adapting the invention to a production process, because the kind of challenges and necessities in between the invention phase to becoming a full-fledged mill, a full-fledged production process, or humongous, the new types of equipment and so on. And the guys were, at the time when I visited, completing this process. And once they managed to solve the quandaries of moving from invention to a production process, they started producing, and they developed the production capabilities. And guess what? Last time I heard from them, they were booming as solar cell producers from Korea to the rest of the world. So this description that I give is, let's say, the typical one from invention to let's say, a product more or less standardized. But the point that I want to make here, and the authors make in the book, is that it's more natural and it's been more common, and it makes all sense for those countries who are coming from behind to move contrary-wise. They start with the production capabilities using technologies reasonably developed and adapted. Well, when they're good and depending on the sector, they add value by adapting and evolving in making an evolution uh, with that technology, either at the product level or the process, and that's when they develop technological adoption capabilities, up to the point at which they may even become inventors. And I will give you the examples at the end of this discussion today, coming from South Korea and China. Okay, but the point make here is that the course taken by developing countries tends to be exactly uh, this one, the reverse one. No, but before I move there, let me explain. Let me address what your authors called the paradox of innovation. Why do they call it paradox innovation? Look, so technology is there, it exists, even if sometimes with a price. In some cases, it is available there. This, in principle, would be an enormous advantage for countries coming from behind. Those are the advantages of the followers. They have already, let's say, the course of technological development uh, being mapped and ready to be replicated with as long as there is enough use, enough development of tacit idiosyncratic levels. And then the paradox of innovation that the authors call attention to is that why under such conditions with the technology available at a reasonably low cost, why is that the developing countries do not use that more? Why it is that the rate of technological progress is not faster in laggard countries? And that's the point when they call attention to the complementary assets, to the other things that are necessary for the local investment in technological capabilities, in development of learning, uh, are, let's say, disincentivized. Keep this in mind because that's where we enter with everything else outside technology to understand the underdevelopment of technological use in developing countries. This chart is simply to show something interesting about the likely evolution. See, I mentioned several types of innovations, right? And notes, this chart show, I decided to include it here, just to show how the new product innovations, both on the national and international levels, are something more frequent exactly in the case of higher income countries. Whereas the more frequently in the case of the other countries, you have uh, you know any innovation production or process prevailing, and innovation has been, let's say, uh, less imitation. In fact, imitation as more frequent in the case of lower income countries. So it's natural that uh, this phasing out of types of innovations as the economy grows in terms of per capita income. This is a chart that I also found interesting to remark how innovation rates vary by sector and types. Some sectors will be more technology absorbing technologies from other sectors, whereas some others will be the source themselves of radical innovations. But overall, all sectors innovate. So no matter how apparently primitive is an economic activity, you will find there the possibility of innovations, even if using as inputs, innovations from other sectors. When I spoke about the sophisticated Brazilian agriculture, I referred to you that it is due to weather forecasting service, to the development of a variegated range of seeds for everything, which obviously comes from the research service and laboratorial and universities and research institutes, is not from the agriculture itself. And equipments and tractors and so on. This comes from the industry, but what matters is that there is innovation in agriculture, even if using components from elsewhere. Naturally, as well, you see in this chart how patents and R&D expenditures are closely related and rise with income. See, it's not all innovation, even radical innovation, is associated with patents. There are some sectors where the producer preferred not to establish a patent and keep the secret regarding the production because they fear that there are many ways to copy the original knowledge. So patent is an output of the innovation process, but not all innovations, radical innovations, are characterized by being registered as patents. And R&D is obviously the input of the process of innovation. It's important to highlight because R&D, the results of R&D are not guaranteed. So a patent, successful and attractive patent, is an output of the R&D that worked well. But you may have failures here as well. But overall, it pays off. Otherwise, firms would not do. So remember how I mentioned the weight of the third layer of capabilities, that is to say, the managerial and of the managerial practice. And interesting, this chart shows how it varies with exactly GDP based on income per capita measured by using the technique of the purchasing power. But the fact is that we do have managerial difference, in which explain to a large extent the difference in productivity and difference in levels of technological capabilities among countries. This is briefly to remind you there is a very good discussion on policies and how the policy mix evolves from less to more sophistication in association with the climbing the capabilities escalator, right? And obviously there are some things that are more basic, and in practice, even if you can try to do everything at the same time, it makes sense, let's say, to put the emphasis on each one of these stages as the economy is climbing the escalator of capabilities ladder. I'm fascinated with ladders, right? Climbing a high ladder, now climbing a capabilities escalator. I'm sorry. This says exactly the same thing in another fashion. Well, but there's also, let me call attention to the fact the public sector, we'll get back to it later on. Let me see just something to check whether I forget to include. Yes. No, let me just check out. Okay, let's move on to productivity now, which, as I said, depends dramatically on on the accumulation of technological capabilities as expressed in the technological learning, uh, but not only that. We will also approach other factors that, let's say, have implications for the efficiency of the factor of production allocation. Uh, we, there is an interesting discussion, which we will return to when we get to the globalization part, on this phenomenon of declining world labor productivity increases in the recent past. And one the second text that you guys read from Maloney and Ana Paula Cusolito approaches what they call the twin productivity puzzles. One of them is this that I referred to, but the other one is exactly the paradox that we were discussing. Now, let's talk a bit about exactly the productivity. Now it's time to see. Again, I'm going to hammer. Productivity accounts for half of the difference, or maybe more than half of the difference in GDP per capita across countries. The growth of productivity, the efficiency with which societies combine their people, resources, and tools is the main driver of the development process. Just to give an idea, the Nobel Prize Paul Krugman was said in 1994, and his assertive is often repeated, which is the following quote: "Productivity isn't everything, but in the long run, it's almost everything." End quote. So identifying policies to stimulate productivity is critical to the rising aspirations of going up the ladder, right? And the firm is the critical player in the system, and its decisions on accumulating capital, labor, or knowledge need to be jointly considered. There are the demand factors and the supply side. I recommend you the chart at the Cusolito Maloney book on the what they call the national productivity system, where they lay out exactly the layers of factors on both the firm level, demanding uh, uh, productivity increase factors, and on the on the supply side, which includes exactly the availability of physical capital, of human capital, and knowledge capital. And then they go on to explain exactly why these things not necessarily work on perfect terms, because you have barriers to accumulation. There are barriers to reallocation of factors. There are barriers to knowledge accumulation, rigidities, and so on. And that's exactly what is at the essence of the inefficiency in resource allocation that characterizes poorer countries. Uh, but let me say a bit about this chart on the source of productivity growth, exactly because the points here, they exactly illustrate what I'm trying to say. Look, there are three components of the increase in productivity growth. First and foremost, of course, there is the possibility or the improved firm performance within firm. That's the within firm productivity growth, uh, which is related to the firms, the individual firms, becoming more productive, that is to say, increasing the amount of output that they produce with a constant amount of inputs, labor, capital, land, raw materials, uh, because they have increased their internal capabilities, including managerial skills, workforce skills, innovation capacity, and technology absorption capability. But there is also a second source of productivity growth, which is improvements in the allocation of factors of production across firms, that is, between firms, that you see in the chart. Ideally, in order to have the maximum productivity, the most productive firms would attract the most resource, thereby making sure that the country has the greatest possible output. Unfortunately, and that's a key and important point, distortions can have large effects. Uh, you have poorly designed legislation, you have political patronage that prevents resource from moving from less efficient firms to more efficient firms. It's incredible how, because exactly barriers to competition, you have the survival of inefficient firms in many developing countries. But I also have the third layer of increasing productivity coming from the improved entry and exit of firms. That is to say, the aggregate productivity can be also, its growth can be explained by the entrance of high productivity firms relative to the average of the industry, and the exit of low productivity firms, again, always relative to the industry range. So these are the keys to understand, to a large extent, difference in productivity, in average productivity, and in total factor productivity between advanced and non-advanced economies. Exactly the obstructed way by which those processes take place. Now, look at this. Let me illustrate what I want by with this chart, which shows how the misallocation, that is to say, a higher dispersion of total factor productivity with the coexistence of firms in different levels, with the less efficient managing to survive and dragging down the average, is illustrated by exactly its relevance to explain part of the difference in per capita GDP among countries. Look at this, how low it is, the degree of dispersion in the United States, whereas in countries like India and Kenya, you have, let's say, a waste of opportunity to increase TFP because of the exactly dispersion in total factor productivity. Okay, now let me move to the last part, which I decided to anticipate from the next segment, which is, a point that I forgot to include in the charts, but it makes all sense. Look, what I'm saying about productivity of firms also applies to governments. There is a beautiful chart in the which data in Cusolito and Maloney, showing the difference in levels of capabilities and productivity of bureaucracies in advanced economies as compared to less advanced economies. In most countries, the government is responsible for a substantial part of GDP. So if it doesn't do those functions with efficiency, of course, this drags down the average of the GDP, right? Okay, but now let me move on to an examples of South Korea and China. First point, globalization has diffused knowledge and technology. We will see, but you have already realized how globalization refers to the increase in FDI, in foreign direct investment, in the in trade, and international use of patents, because and those have disseminated knowledge and technology across borders. And this diffusion, as I said at the beginning, can lead to increases in average outputs at relatively low costs, right? And the more the technology is widespread, its multiple use may generate opportunities for spillovers, for positive network effects, and cross-pollination for everyone. Just to give you an idea, what the chart shows you, the evolution, the contribution as measured by the IMF in this report of April 2018, the contribution of foreign knowledge to labor productivity growth in those countries. And interestingly, and let me quote the IMF, because this figure is says it all. From 2004 to 2014, foreign knowledge accounted for about 0.7 percentage point of labor productivity growth a year, or in fact, 40% of observed sectoral productivity growth. This is comparable with a 0.4 percentage point annual growth during 95-2003. And before any one of you asks about China, whether the inclusion of China may not distort the average because of the astounding performance of China, the report points out that even when China is excluded, productivity effects were broad-based among emerging market economies. And guess what? But I wanna call attention to is also this one. Look at this. This is the evolution of the two, the output of the innovation process, patent, one of them, and the expenditures on R&D, the gross domestic expenditure on R&D. And as one might expect, you see here, United States, Japan, you see the European Union, the G3 countries of the European Union. But look at this, look at the rise of patent in both Korea and China. And when it comes to R&D, look at exactly the pattern, the previous pattern of the same of patenting, but also the evolution of China as well as Korea. The point is that both have shown, in the case of South Korea, is particularly machinery, but both have displayed a humongous success in electrical and optical equipment. And even though the frontiers, remember the twin puzzles, even if the frontier started a period in which the productivity and the technology was not, particularly productivity, was not going up as fast as in the past, but these countries coming from behind managed to keep on rising and growing and using new technologies and performing as the chart showed. But as I said in the beginning, this is only one edge of the double edge process, because there are local requisites to escalate the ladder of innovation capabilities. The simple interconnectedness does not automatically spark the productivity increases in local innovation. uh, to take it on as a walk away, as a takeaway. Any application of technology needs locally specific content that cannot be acquired or transferred by means of textbooks or other codifiable forms of knowledge transmission. This knowledge cannot be made explicit, such as simply displaying them in using blueprints, and so they can never be perfectly diffused, either as public information or as private property. It must be developed locally. And also, the production technology adoption and invention, this process requires a, uh, therefore, innovation capabilities from on one side, and the point from inside, and the point that success depends on the presence of a broad set of complementary factors, and that's the case of these two countries: access to finance, infrastructure, skilled labor, and good managerial and organizational practice. Because otherwise, in the absence of those factors, the return from investing in the development of capabilities is likely to be low. And so public policies must find solutions to market failures that generate disincentives to the accumulation of knowledge, the transaction costs associated with doing business, with the business environment, such as difficulties to trade across the border, difficulties with hiring or firing, difficulties to enforce contracts, to solve judicial litigations, and so on, cannot be too high, because otherwise the calculus, the rational calculus about the return on investing in learning, will desensitize the local production. And as I said, this is what explains the innovation paradox. Low levels of innovation related investment in developing economies do not correlate with the high returns thought to accompany technological adoption and catch up. Globalization may spread knowledge, but profiting fully from that knowledge requires a further effort. This is part of the overall takeaway that I want to leave with you today, and lying behind exactly the accumulation of intangible assets of capabilities that is so key in the evolution of the per capita income along the ladder, as we saw in the previous sessions. Okay? See you.